to go.
Okay. So what we're trying to do today, guys, is we're trying to download the data analysis pack. So if you guys look up here at the top, all of your different ribbon options, we're going to click on the tab that says data. And if you have the data analysis pack, it's going to be right over here and it's going to say data analysis. If you don't, like right now, I do not, we're going to download that. So here's how we need to download that. So if you have it, if it says data analysis, you don't need to go through these steps. But if you don't have this data analysis pack, we have to do this together. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over to the ribbons again, and you're going to click on File. And then you're going to come all the way down to Options. So again, you're going to go File, Options, and it's going to bring up this little window right here. Once you get this window, we're going to come down to this button that says add-ins. And there's all of these options, which is really exciting. We need this first one. It says Analysis Tool Pack. So you're going to click and highlight it. Do not click OK. This is really important. You click and highlight it, and you're going to come down here and click Go. So again, File, Options, Add-ins, Analysis Tool Pack, and then you're going to click Go. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring up this little window. Now on this window, we only want the top one that says Analysis Tool Pack. I don't want the one that says VBA. That means nothing to me. Just click on the box that says Analysis Tool Pack, and then you're going to click OK. And it's going to think for a minute, and then what that should do is that should bring up the data analysis button. Okay. Now at any time, if you're like, I don't know what happened to my data analysis pack, it's gone. Use your brains and use your logical thinking skills. You can Google it. Google how to install data analysis pack on Excel. And like, I have a video linked on, sorry, that's my dog. I have a video linked on Canvas. It's like 2 minutes and you don't even have to watch the whole 2 minutes. I think it was like 1:30 and we got it done. Okay. All right. So today we are going to construct frequency distributions, and I'll minimize this so it's out of your way. You guys okay with that? So you guys have probably done this before. We're just going to talk about like what I expect if we have to do it on the test. So there are 4 steps to constructing a frequency distribution. The first one is to determine how many classes there should be in the distribution. And that literally depends on how many data values you have. The more data values you have, the more classes that you're probably going to have. But there is such a thing as too little or too many classes in general. So you want between 4 classes and 20 classes. If you have less than 4 classes, like if you have 2 or 3 classes, like then what's the point of making a frequency distribution in the first place? And if you have more than 20, then it's chaos. Like it's not worth looking at. It's too much. Now, the next thing you need to do is you need to figure out the class width. So once you like look at it and you're like, okay, I see this data, I'm going to go with 5 classes, or I'm going to go with 10 classes. Then you need to determine the class width, which means like in this class, the lowest number that we can include is this, and the highest that we can include is this. And to do that, there's just a quick little formula. You take the maximum minus the minimum, which is literally just the range of your data, and you divide it by how many classes that you want. But be aware when you do that, sometimes you're going to get decimal results, which obviously this is math. Sometimes it's messy, and you're going to just round that up to the nearest integer to make it easy to comprehend. Now be aware when you're rounding it, you want to round it up to make sure that we like include everything. After you do that, you're going to find the class limits, which means, okay, I want 10 classes and I want them to have a width or a spread of like 20 units. So that means my first class is going to start here and here. My next class is going to start here and here, yada, yada. And then finally, you're going to determine the frequency of each class. So going through all these rules, like it's a lot, and you're like, duh, it makes more sense if we apply it. So that's what we're going to do. So I have this example here, and it says a data set containing the heart rates of 50 students is given below. Create a frequency distribution in the table below. So what they've given you right here is they've given you 50 heart rates of students, and they're saying we want a frequency distribution down here. Now, to create the frequency distribution, we're just going to follow those 4 steps. Step 1, determine how many classes should be in the distribution. Well, actually, this table has already done that for us. If you'll notice, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They want it to be 5 classes big. They want 5 different classes. Then to determine the class width, we need to take the maximum value and subtract the minimum value and divide it by the number of classes that we want. So here's what I want you to do. If you look at these values, clearly they're not in numerical order. So I want you to take a minute and I want you to find your minimum value and circle it, and your maximum value and circle it. I'll wait while you get that done. So we have a minimum value and our maximum value. To determine your class width, you're going to take that maximum and you're going to subtract your minimum, and you're going to divide it by how many classes you want, which is 5. Now you need to be very careful here, because when you put this into your calculator, you have to remember the order of operations. So if you put it into your calculator, 98 minus 62 divided by 5, it's going to divide first. We can't do that. So what you need to do is you need to put parentheses around it. Parentheses 98 minus 62, close your parentheses, divided by 5, and you get 7.2. You get 7.2. So where am I at? Now, we can't have a class width of 7.2. That doesn't really work. So I'm going to round it to the nearest integer. Now you have 2 options here. You can either round it to 7 or you can round it to 8. Here's where frequency distributions are different for everybody. It literally depends on what you choose that works for your data. So like if I choose to round it to 7, then that means like I just have to make sure everything fits in there. So I'm going to round it to 7 and I'm going to see if it encompasses everything. Now, my first number here is 62. So if I start at 60 and I have a class width of 7, my first category would be 60 to 67. Now that definitely encompasses my lowest guy. And then we need to talk about like how we're counting here. My next class definitely would not start at 67. And here's why. Because if I got a heart rate of 67, I would have no idea where to put it. Does it go in this one? Does it go in this one? I have no idea. So what you need to do is you need to be aware of a couple of things. First of all, what kind of numbers are you dealing with? Discrete or continuous? So if you look at the heart rates, we're dealing with discrete data. You can't have 55.5 heartbeats. So we don't have to worry about decimals. That just means our next guy is going to start at 68. You okay with that? Now, something that I actually kind of said wrong and I need to just verify here. If I have a class width of 7, this would actually be 60 to 67. This is actually a class width of 8 right here. If you want to know what is my class width here, you would take 67 minus 60 and you'd get 7, but you actually have to add 1, and here's why. Because it includes 60. That means you have heart rates of 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, and 67 in that class. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So since it includes 60 and 67, that is 8, a class width of 8. So be aware of that when you are making your frequency table. Now, I just need to finish filling out the rest of this table. So 68, and then I'm going to add 7 to it. So 68 plus 7 is 75. So that means this one's going to start at 76. We're going to add 7 again, which would be 83. So this would start at 84. Add 7, which would be 91. So this would start at 92. Add 7, and that goes up to 99. And notice how my maximum here is 98. And so it does encompass all of the data. It encompasses the minimum all the way to the maximum. So what we've just done right now is we have actually found all the lower limits and upper limits. This column right here, these are all the lower limits of my classes, and these are all the upper limits right here. Next, what we need to do is just do the frequency. So here's how we do the frequency. We're going to look at the data and we're going to figure out how many in each category. So like this data value right here, 77, would go into this category. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put a tick mark, and then I'm going to cross it off. Then we're going to say 84 goes into this category. So I'm going to put a tick mark and I'm going to cross it off. 79 goes into this category, cross it off. So here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go ahead and take a second and find all of these data values where they go, and then we'll compare numbers when we come back. So when you're done, it should look something like this, all of your tallies. Again, this is not ideal, like it takes a long time. When you're creating frequency distributions, you usually do it as you go. So like maybe you're doing like a survey and you're walking around the halls and you're tallying the responses as you get them. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take these tallies and you're just going to make them easier to read. Hold on, I need a drink. You're going to take these tallies and you're going to turn them into numbers so they're easier to read. That way, like when someone's looking at your data, they don't have to sit here and think through how many tallies you have each time. So heart rates between 60 and 67, we had 3 students. Between 68 and 75, you should have 9 students. Between 76 and 83, we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 students. Between 84 and 91, we have 10. And between 92 and 99, we have 3. So it should look like that. Now, the next piece of information says, now find the relative frequency, cumulative frequency, and cumulative relative frequency for each class. Now, we talked about the relative frequency last class, so this shouldn't be anything new. What you're going to do is you're going to take, for each column, you're going to take this number and divide it by how many total that you have, and then turn it into a percentage. Now, be aware, you could sit here and you could add all these together, but they also told us already that there were 50 students, 50 heart rates that we're dealing with. So all you need to do is take this number and divide it by 50. So in your calculator, you're going to take 3 divided by 50, and you're going to get 0.06. Now, that's a decimal, not a percentage. If you want to turn it into a percentage, you can either move that decimal place to the right, or if you're not one of those people who can like do that in your head, all you need to do is multiply it by 100, and that'll give us 6%. So the relative frequency of my first class is 6%. 6% of my heart rates were in that class. Now we're going to do the same thing for the second class. So we're going to take 9 divided by 50, and if you need to, multiply it by 100, but that's going to give me 18%. 18% of my heart rates were in the second class. So go ahead and take a second and finish filling out that column. And when you're done, you can make sure that you did it right by adding all of these together, and you should get 100%. So I add like this. I go 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 18 is 30, plus 20 is 50, plus 50 is 100. So we have 100% there, which means we did it right. Now, the next 2 columns are new to us. The next 2 columns are called cumulative frequency and cumulative relative frequency. And I have those definitions down at the bottom of your page. The cumulative frequency is the sum of the frequency of a class and all classes below it. Now, here's a good way to think about this. When you guys look at applying for colleges, they don't ask for your high school GPA. They ask for your high school cumulative GPA. Now, here's what that means. This year, your senior year, other than this class, y'all might have chosen to take a bunch of easy classes. Maybe you chose to take pottery and weights and GPS and all of these classes that were really easy to get easy A's in. And that would mean that maybe this year, your senior year, you have a 4.0 GPA, but that's not reflective of how hard you've worked your entire high school career. To figure that out, you would have to look at your cumulative GPA, which means they take your GPA from your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year, and your senior year. They put them together. So cumulative doesn't just mean this year, it means all the years that came before it. So to find your cumulative frequency, we're going to look at your frequency column, your number of students column, and you're going to take whatever column you have or whatever box cell we're looking at and add everything below it. So the cumulative frequency of my first class is literally just 3. Like there's nothing below it. That's all we can do. But then when I look at my second class to get the cumulative frequency of it, it's asking what's the frequency of this class and the one below it. So we're going to take this 9 and add 10, 11, 12. And then the next class, we're going to do the same thing. Now we're going to take 25 plus 9 plus 3. So that's going to give me 37. And then we're going to take 10 plus 25 plus 9 plus 3, which is going to give me 47. And then we're going to take 3 plus 10 plus 25 plus 9 plus 3, and that's going to give me 50. And if you did it right, your very last cell should have the total number of students that you guys found the heart rates for, because it should encompass every single heart rate that you measured. Now, the cumulative relative frequency is the same concept, but instead of using the frequency column, we're going to use the relative frequency column. So what you're going to do is you're just going to focus on this guy. So the cumulative relative frequency for your first guy is just going to be your first guy, no big deal. Now, another way that you could find that, because some people are like, what if I didn't find that? Then you could just take each one of these cumulative frequencies and divide it by the total number, which is 50. So you could take 3 divided by 50, 12 divided by 50, 37 divided by 50. But if we already have this column, let's not make it hard on ourselves. Let's just add them together as we go. So my second column here is going to be 18 plus 6, which is 24%. So a good question that you might see that would like cause you to need to know the cumulative relative frequency would be, what percentage of students had a heart rate that was 75 beats per minute or lower? So you would look here, 75 or lower. So that would mean anywhere from 60 to 75, and that would be the 24%. So my third column here would be 6 plus 18 plus 50, which would be 74%. My fourth column would be 6 plus 18 plus 50 plus 20, which would be 94%. And then my last column would be all of these bad boys added up together, which would be 100%. And if you did it right, you should definitely have 100% there. All right, when you're ready, flip it over to the back side. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is how to create a frequency distribution in Excel, because this is a lot. Like, I don't want to sit there and count all these values and figure out what it's going to be. Let's let Excel do it for us. So on the back, what I've done is I have typed out those steps so you can have them, and I've given you a table. It says create a frequency distribution on Excel for the following data. Well, that's a lot of data, and I really don't want to type all that into Excel because I could type in the wrong number. So I don't know if you guys know this, but if you download Microsoft Office on your cell phones, and I'm going to turn on the video so you guys can maybe see me here. There we go. If you download Microsoft Office onto your cell phone, what can happen is you can literally take a picture of a data table and it will transpose it into data for you. So you don't have to like sit there and type it all in, which is amazing. So I've already done that for you, no big deal. So here's what I want you to do. Get out your computers, and when you get out your computer, you are going to go to Canvas. Okay, go to Canvas. And then you're going to click on, it says practice 3.3 plus Excel. You're going to click on that Excel. And you're going to download that. So I have taken this data and I've already put it onto an Excel sheet. I want you guys to download it because we are going to work through this together. Now, what we're going to do today, guys, is we are going to work through these steps that I've given you on the back of the sheet, and I'm going to explain everything that needs to happen so you guys know how to do this in the future. So step 1 says enter all the data into a column in Excel with a column header. That is really, really important. So if you like have a highlighter or a pencil or something, I would make a notation with a column header. This does not work without a column header. So I've already got that data here for you, and it's got column headers, which is really important. Step 2 says in a separate column, type the upper limits for your classes. Notice how it didn't say the lower limits and upper limits, just the upper limits. That's what we need to make this data make a frequency table. But finding the upper limits is something we still have to do yet. Now, if you're like, I don't remember how to find the limits, you can go back to the front side of the paper. And to find the limits, you have to go through those 4 steps. You have to determine how many classes should be in the distribution. and you have to figure out the class width, and then you have to figure the upper and lower limits. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out our max value and our min value. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep things nice and neat and organized because there's going to be a lot of work here. I'm going to first start by finding my maximum value in all of these numbers that they gave me. Now, you could sit here and you could like rearrange everything from highest to lowest, but right now they have everything organized in alphabetical order, and we're going to leave it like that. To find our maximum value, you're just going to come over here and you're going to hit equals, and then you're going to type in max, M-A-X, and it says it returns the largest value in a set of data. That's exactly what we need. So we're going to open parenthesis, and I'm going to select all of these numbers here. I want the maximum value of all of those numbers. Then you're going to hit enter, and the maximum value is 240.33. Then we're going to do the same thing, but for the minimum value. So the next one is minimum, and that's going to be equals MIN, and that says returns the smallest number, which is exactly what we want. Open parenthesis, and you're going to select all of those numbers again. And that tells me that my minimum value is 25.14. So this is talking about Dow Jones Industrial Average Closing Prices. So this has to do with the stock market. And it's saying, what is the average closing price in dollars at the end of the day? And it's saying the maximum value is $240.33. The minimum value is $25.14. So that's really helpful. Now, before we find our limits, we have to figure out how many classes we want. So if I look here, I start on 3 and I go all the way down to 32. So that means I have about 29 or 30 of these. I think I have 30 values, which means like how many classes do I want to break this into? This is a pretty big range here. If you look like 240 and 25, that's a big range. I want to make the classes a little smaller. So let's say that the number of classes that I want is 10. I want to break it into 10 classes. Okay, now you can choose whatever you want. Some people will decide to do 6 classes. Some may decide to do 8 classes, but just for the sake of this assignment, let's just do 10 classes. Now, since I know the maximum value and the minimum value and how many classes I want, now I'm going to get my class width. Now be careful here because you're going to have 2 different class widths. You're going to have a calculated class width, and then you're going to have your actual class width. Okay, so to do your calculated class width, you're going to come over here and be very careful because just like we did in the calculator, you need those parentheses to follow the order of operations. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit equals, and then you're going to do open parenthesis, and you have the formula on your paper. We want max minus min over the number of classes. So in the parentheses, you want your maximum value minus your minimum value, then close those parentheses because we want that to happen first. And then you're going to divide it by the number of classes that we want, which is 10. And then you're going to hit enter. So that's my calculated class width. I'm going to have a class width of 22 or 21.519, but that's not realistic because I'm like what is that? So my actual class width, we're just going to round that up and say 22. I want a class width of 22. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to find our class limits. Now we have 2 different types of limits we have to find. We have to find the lower limits and the upper limits. Now to find your lower limits, you're literally looking for like what's the absolute lowest that I want to go. So if I'm finding the lower limits here, you need to look at like my minimum. My lower limit has to encompass my minimum. So if my minimum is 25.14, maybe my lower limit is going to start at 25. Then I'm going to have a class width of 22. I have a class width of 22. So a lot of people think that means I'm going to take 25 plus 22 and get an upper limit of 47, but that is not the case. what we're going to do is we're going to say the difference between the first lower limit and the second lower limit is 22. So here's what you're going to do for this guy here. You're going to go equals, and you're going to take your last lower limit and you're going to add it to your actual class width. So that's going to be the beginning of your next lower limit. Now, I don't want to go through here and say equals this guy plus my next guy. That's a lot, especially for 10 classes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that a formula. I'm going to say G2 plus E5, but I want to make that cell reference an absolute cell reference because I don't want it to move. So we talked about this in the past. You put those dollar signs for me. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click the little box and we're going to drag it down. And you'll notice it goes up by 22 every time until you have 10 classes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have too many, so I'm just going to delete this bottom one. Now, for the upper limits, people are going to get a little confused. They're like, wait a minute, I don't understand. The class width was 22, so shouldn't the upper limit be 47? But then where do I put the 47? The upper limit is going to be right below the lower limit. Now, since we're dealing with money, since we're dealing with decimals, our limits are going to have decimals too. So I want my upper limit to go right up below my lower limit, but not quite. So what that would be 47, and then I'm just going to take away 0.1, so that would be 46.9. So my first class covers all values from 25 to 46.9. Then my second class takes over 47, and it's going to go all the way up to this guy, but it's going to be right below it. So you can do this a couple of different ways. You can look at this guy and take away 0.1, or once you have your first guy, why don't we do just like we did over here, and we're going to take my previous cell and add that class limit again of 22. And again, I'm going to make it an absolute cell reference. Well, that's a percent sign. All right, then we're going to click and drag that down. So I'm going to take a second here, and I want you guys to all double check to make sure that we have the same numbers. Guys, the next thing we're going to do is going to seem a little weird, but just trust me on this, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we are going to, we're going to have a column called bin width. And what we're going to do is we're literally going to type it out what we would want it to look like. So 25 to 46.9. All I did was I took this guy and then the number or the word 2 and then this guy. And we need to do that all the way down. So the next one will be 47 to 68.9 and 69 to 90.9. And that's going to seem weird, but I need you to do that because it's going to be helpful later. So go ahead and take a minute to do that. Now, when you're done, you need to double check. Like my maximum value was 240.33. We already know my minimum value fits because we made it that way. We just need to make sure that it encompasses my maximum value as well. So my highest upper limit is 244.9, which means that my maximum value does fit in there, and that's okay. Okay, so just a reminder, we are following the steps on the back of the practice. So we have done step 1, enter all the data into a column in Excel with a column header. That's done, that's good. Step 2, in a separate column, type the upper limits for your classes. We definitely did that. That's this column right here. Step 3, in a third column, type the class limits for labels on your frequency table. That right here, we've already done. That's what I called bin width. You can call that class limits or labels, whatever. I don't care. That's what we just did here. Now we're ready for step 4. Is everybody ready, or do we need a minute?
You're ready?
Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to the data tab. You're going to go to the data tab to open up this data ribbon. And we're going to click on that button we just downloaded, data analysis. And what that's going to do is that's going to open a little box. And this is the data analysis box. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on the word histogram. We're going to create a histogram with this. And then you're going to click OK. And it's going to come up with all of this information. And we have to pick the information that we want in there. Now, to do this, you're going to start with input range. To click on the input range, you want all of these numbers, but you need to make sure you get the column header in there with it. That's the whole reason we needed it. So I'm going to start by clicking on closing prices in dollars, and I'm going to highlight all the way down to the 78.37, that Walmart closing price. Okay, you need every single one of them. So you'll notice it'll make it an absolute cell reference, and that's okay. B2 to B32, that's what we need. The next one is our bin range. So I'm going to click in here. Now our bin range is the upper limits. That's the upper limits column. Make sure that when you choose those cells, you click the column header with it. That's crucial. You have to have the column header with it. So I'm going to click on this upper limits all the way down to 244.9. So for me, that was H1 to H11. The next thing we need to talk about is output options. That's saying, okay, this is what you want us to look at and to divvy up. Where do you want our information to go? You have three options. You can put it in a new workbook, which is going to open a new Excel document. We don't want that. We can put it in a new worksheet, which would open up a new sheet down here. We don't want that. So you're going to click on this box here that says output range. And you're going to click right here, and you're going to click like this cell right here. I click G or D14. That means it's going to show up right here, right? Now, before we click OK, there's one more thing we need to click, and that's this box right down here that says chart output. We want it to put out a chart with the histogram that it's creating. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to move this so you guys can see. I want you guys to double check that your input and your bin range and your output range match mine. Okay. Excuse you. Did theirs also come up and say that?
It's mixed. Some did, some didn't.
Well, it shouldn't say that. If it did, here's what they need to do. If it did, they need to change it so it doesn't include the headers, closing price and upper limits. So reselect that data so it's only the numbers. Next thing we need to do, look at your graph. Like, look at this down here. That's disgusting, right? Like, that's not a good label. 46.9, like, what is that? This column over here, where we like typed it out, I want you to click just the numbers. And I want you to hit Control copy. I want you to copy that. So Control C. And you're going to come over here into this table that it popped out into this table and click on that first one where it says 46.9, and you're going to paste it, Control V. And it changes it for you, which is what we want. So here's what this whole data analysis pack did. It took all of this data and made a frequency table for you. So it said, you chose the bin numbers. Here's the frequency of each of these in the bin numbers. There are 5 companies that had closing prices from $25 to $46.90 in our data. Then it said there's 3 in the next one, there's 5 in the next one, there's 5 in the next one. It made a frequency table for you. Okay, let's talk about this histogram, guys. You guys see this histogram? It sucks. Do we know why it sucks? Like, what kind of labels are these? These are terrible labels. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fix these labels, okay? Histogram is the worst chart title I've ever seen in my life. Instead, it should be literally what we're talking about, which is Dow Jones Industrial Average Closing Prices, right? So here's how we fix it. You're going to click on this. You're going to double click on it. So again, to do that, you need to click on it once and then double click on it. Because in clicking it, you select it, double click on it, you can edit it. And then you're going to fix it. Dow Jones, make sure you capitalize appropriately. Industrial average closing prices. Now, notice how small that made my bars. We can fix that a couple of different ways. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. So I'm going to highlight it all. And then you can go to your home ribbon and you can like make the size just a teeny bit smaller. Okay. Then down here, it just calls it bin. Like, that's awful. What do these numbers represent? There are widths, but in context of the problem, those numbers represent the closing prices in dollars. We're going to fix that. So again, over here, you're going to click on it to select it, double click it to edit it. And you're just going to type in closing prices. And then in parentheses, I put the $sign so we know what we're measuring in. Quick question, does anybody not have axis labels? Does anybody not have these axis labels here?
I think we're all good.
Okay. I don't like this little frequency over here. Obviously, we know that it's frequency, like it's like a key. We don't need that for this because we only have one. So how about you guys click on it and just delete it? Now, let's talk about this more down here. I don't like this more because it's like, is there any price that's more than 244.9? We already know that there's not because we created these bins. I want this more to go away, right? Now you could come over here and delete it. Like you could click on this guy right here and click delete and you'll notice that it'll go away, but this space is still there. So that doesn't help me, right? So here's how we're going to get it to go away. Are you ready? You are going to right click on the data, right click on the data, and you're going to come down here to select data. So again, Jocelyn and Lainey, you're going to right click on the data and you're going to come down here to select data and it's going to pull this up. Okay. Now change nothing, do nothing with this box, nothing, except over here, there's a little scrolly bar, scroll it all the way to the bottom. And you see where it says more? Uncheck that box. I don't want it. It's gross. Then you're going to hit OK. And it's gone. Okay. Now, I need someone real smart to tell me what's wrong with this. Like this created a histogram. What's wrong with this histogram?
It looks stupid.
Why does it look stupid?
It's crammed.
Like for, oh, okay, then make it bigger. You can like stretch it out and look, it makes it easier to read.
Ella's OCD is going to go crazy.
But real talk, why is this not a histogram?
I don't know.
We're getting a lot of, because it's a bar graph.
Exactly. This is a bar graph. This is not a histogram. What are you supposed to do to make it a histogram? What makes a histogram different than a bar graph?
Is it horizontal?
No.
Do they
Think
touch?
about the bars.
Do they touch?
Yes, they're supposed to touch. They're supposed to touch. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to click on this data and you're going to right click it again. And this time we're going to click on Format Data Series. So again, Lainey, right click on the data, Format Data Series, and it's going to come up with this little box over here. Now look right here, gap width. It's saying the gaps between the bars are 150%. We just want to drag that down to 0. We want the bars to be touching. Gap width down to 0. Now, you can leave it like that. It's totally fine. I accept it like this. I am a very particular kind of person. And I'm like, well, how do I know where one bar ends and one bar begins? So if you want, you can come over to this little like fill and line, the little paint bucket. And I like to give it a border. I like to say there's a solid line border and I make it black. Do not make the solid line border white because then it looks like gaps. That does not do anything. and then I just make it a little thicker so I can see it. So that's what I do. You do not have to put a border. Again, though, if you do a border, do not make it white because then it looks like a gap. All right. Now there's one more thing that I want to do. One more thing. And that involves like the data values here. I know this is 5. I can see that that's 3. But when I get over here, I'm like guessing on what it is. So I want you to click on this little plus up here. This little plus. It's a chart elements. And that's going to pop up all of these options. I want you to click on data labels and it's going to put the actual number right above it like we would do.